Hello, everybody, and welcome to the TF1 show. I'm very excited. We have a very special guest on this week. We have Ollie from TGS F1 joining us to unpack the 70th anniversary Formula One Grand Prix. I don't know what the proper name is, but let's roll with that. Welcome, Ollie.
Hey, mate. Thank you very much for having me. And you're right. You got to get the names right or the hashtags right on Twitter, or everyone's going to come at you like they did for Racing Point. So I think it was the 70th anniversary.
Yeah, we people are in a very litigious mood recently. So I must look out for the lawyers' letters, probably like in the post. But yeah, so excited to have you on. I guess, as per usual with these race reviews, let's jump straight into the Grand Prix. And I guess we can chat about qualifying briefly as well. And we'll go through the teams in the order in which they finished, more or less. So, Ollie, let's start with Red Bull. Now, how surprised are you that they ended up winning the race with Max?
Very surprised. I think looking at the race going into it, I think it was quite clear, unfortunately, to everyone that Hulkenberg wasn't going to be able to keep Max behind for a while. But I would be lying and trying to claim knowledge that I didn't have if I thought that he was going to have a chance of catching and overtaking the Mercedes. I thought, like we've seen so many times already this season, they were going to run off ahead of the pack and leave the guys behind. But you can't trust anything when you've got Max Verstappen behind the wheel of a car. And the way that they actually called him off the attack almost in the race, and he decided to go for it himself. And the pace that he then had for the rest of the race on any tyre was, quicker than those Mercedes. And it looked like his race pace and that, long run pace was unstoppable and uncatchable, which it proved to be. But very surprised, did not expect it. I had him down to podium, but did not expect them to win that race at all.
No, I agree 100%. It was actually crazy how Verstappen was able to, especially that first stint, just keep going, just kept going faster and faster and faster, even after the two Mercedes pitted. And I thought, they're going to start catching Max, but Max was still going quicker than them, despite them being on the fresh tires, which was very, very surprising. And I thought the fact that Max basically just went in against what his team ordered him to do shows what confidence he has as well. I think he knows what he's capable of. He was driving well within himself still, and he wasn't going to let that go without a fight. I think a big underline, under his name, or, he really underlined his pace over the weekend. And I think how good he is as a driver. I saw the arguments pop up on Twitter again, is Max Verstappen the best driver on the grid at the moment? And with performances like the one he did today, there's an argument to be made. I think obviously this is a whole different debate and a whole different can of worms that we can open, if you had to get into this discussion. But I think, Max did a very, very good job throughout. And I think what was very encouraging for me personally was Albon was on the pace as well. Especially that last stint while Albon was catching trying to catch the racing points. He was lapping exactly the same times as Max while both of them were pushing. And that to me is very encouraging, which shows that, if Albon can just sort out his qualifying pace, I think he can make some damage or cause some problems for the Mercs in the right situation. So, Ollie, it has been a bit of a contentious topic, and we saw lots of videos come out about Alex over the last couple of days. What's your take on Alex Albon after this race weekend?
It's a tricky one because it's difficult because when I look at it, you want to critique him fairly, but the hat I always try and put on when I'm criticizing a Red Bull driver is not necessarily what do I think, but what do I think the Red Bull organization is thinking, if that makes sense, because they are very cutthroat, and we've seen in the past that they're not afraid to move people around. They're not afraid to drop drivers and promote drivers, and they've got the setup with, let's say, Toro Rosso with AlphaTauri to do that. And to me, he was performing no better than Pierre was during his difficult stint at the start of this season up until now. And I think you're right. This was a bit of a breakthrough race for him, if you like. I think he only finished fifth. But in terms of that race pace, it was much better. And I think one of the things that Red Bull generally did really well today was just try and change it up with the strategy, because most teams don't think that they can compete with a Mercedes on track for raw pace. Red Bull looked like they could and did today through Max, but pitting, I think they pitted Albon early. Was he the first person to come into the pit? Complete opposite then with Max, obviously. He stayed out to try and get that extended stint through the first set of tyres. So I think Albon did a really good job. I think he's going to take a lot of confidence out of this race, and hopefully he will then showcase something similar on Saturday. I would say up until today, I was thinking maybe he's not quite got it, but it's very early. It's too early to judge sort of objectively. I know that Red Bull get rid of people sooner than, I don't know how many races he's had now with them, but yeah, I think I'd give him, till the end of this year now and see what he can do, because he has proven that he can be quick, and he was defended by George and everyone else saying he was always the fastest guy they knew growing up. It just shows that Red Bull is difficult to drive if you're not Max. But like you said, those lap times, he was going purple quite a lot throughout that middle section of the race as well. So yeah, some of the best overtaken as well, actually, by him, thinking about it today, even on Kimi, like putting the car right out there on the edge and then getting through the field in the final sort of stint of the race as well. So yeah, great race from Alex. Problem will be, if he can't do that consistently, he's not going to bring home the sort of points that they want and that he probably needs himself. But it was a great race from him, and probably the best feeling he's had for a while on a Sunday afternoon.
No, I agree 100% with that. I think maybe I'm a bit soft on Alex, but I do think in his defense, and a lot of people are trying to draw parallels between how he's doing and how Pierre was doing. And I think in qualifying, I agree. I think they have the same difficulties compared to last year. I think Alex's might be even more exacerbated just because of how close the midfield is at the moment, and also how close Red Bull is to the midfield in qualifying trim. So there it's, I think he wasn't, I think it was like 4/10 off Max in qualifying, and obviously a big difference in positions. But the races that Albon has driven us, to me, made the difference between, him and Pierre. And I've said this a couple of times, but Pierre, he just got stuck. Like, if you remember, there were so many races last year where, like, he started from 6th or 7th on the grid, and then he just didn't move up. He would start 7th and sometimes finish 9th or 8th, or like he couldn't pass the cars he had to pass. And I think that's where Alex makes the difference for me, where, look, like even last week where it was a bit of a disaster, he still made the keep, like went passed right from the back of the grid through the field, finished 8th. And I think, we saw all the great passes he made today. And they weren't easy or simple passes. Silverstone is actually quite a hard track to pass on if you don't have a massive time offset. So I thought he did really, really well. And again, I'm going to repeat it. I hope Red Bull are listening. There's no point in kicking Alex Albon to the curb this year. Like, I see no one benefiting. Red Bull, they're not going to win the champ. Even after today, I think, and we can maybe go into this a bit more after this, but Red Bull, I don't think they're going to win the constructors this year. They can steal a race win here and there with Max, like they've been doing over the last how many years, but they're not going to win the constructors. So they might as well give Alex the opportunity to find his feet, to find the marginal gains, take the pressure off, let him and his new race engineer work on improving his qualifying. Because I think as soon as he gets within 0.2 of Max, I think it's going to be a different ball game.
Yeah, I think you're right. I can't see them winning it this year, and probably not next year as well. Probably going to have to wait till the new regs. But a great point that I think you made there, which I chatted about on Twitter, was that it's not just necessarily that he's far off Max now. It's that the gains from the midfield now means that 3/4 in qualifying that might have only dropped you back, 3 or 4 grid spots in the past. Suddenly it's so close between, 3rd and 10th at the minute. You've got Ferraris not making it out of Q2. You've got these teams that, have all made that 1 lap time much more, making those increases on the 1 lap times much better than others. I mean, George Russell is doing it in qualifying as well. And as it gets more bunched, you do forget when you look at the timing screens, you think, oh, look how far back they are. This is a small fraction of a second in, across a lap, which is 90 seconds or whatever it might be. And yeah, I think that's one thing he's suffering from, just the increased performance from those behind him, meaning that he's just starting the race probably not quite where he needs to be if he wants to push for those podiums and so on. So yeah, I would agree with you on that, and I can't wait for the day that he does get on the podium, because it'll be a party, I'm sure, for everyone.
A big party, I'm going to tell you that. Now, let's move on to Mercedes. So, for them, a devastating result. I mean, they're probably crushed. No, I'm being sarcastic, but they weren't happy. I think Valtteri especially didn't look very happy afterwards, and you can imagine starting on pole and coming home in third, being overtaken by your teammates is never a good feeling. So what did you make of Mercedes today in the race? Obviously, they were miles ahead in qualifying as we expected, but then today was a bit of a curveball.
Yeah, I mean, you joked, but you're right. And I think Joe from the F1 Club tweeted before, those guys, unless it's a 1-2, those guys are livid. They're absolutely fuming all the time. You see it with Lewis if he's not on pole. Suddenly his whole demeanour is like he's ready to punch someone. They're frustratingly good, and it didn't play out for them today, and it was interesting, and in the coverage over here in the UK, Paul di Resta and Crofty were talking about, should they have thought a little bit more about their Sunday situation on Saturday? They went onto that softer compound for Q2. And I don't think it was complacency, because they're too good to be complacent, but I just think they thought they were going to perform better. But we're seeing with this car that the tyre management on this car in the hotter conditions isn't quite where they would expect it to be. And normally people talk about Lewis as the guy who can, massage the tyres, and he's so good at, doing all that sort of stuff. That's what Max did today, and what the Mercedes just couldn't do. I mean, they went in for that first pit stop. 5-6 laps later, there was blistering everywhere. There was constant slow-mo zooming in on their tyres and the tread and all the damage that was being done. So, yeah, I was surprised. I mean, a 2-3 is a huge haul of points and a great result objectively. But they're, like you said, they're looking at that thinking, right, what went wrong? How can we really solve this? And for Valtteri, I mean, that guy just gets kicked in the gonads every single week by Lewis Hamilton. And it's tricky. I do feel for him, but at the same time, they are in the same car, and if he wants to fight with the best, he's got to perform the way that the best perform, and Lewis is just quicker than him. And if he can't convert a pole position into a race win, he's going to struggle to become world champion ever against Lewis Hamilton, because you can't have a better starting grid spot than the numero uno, and he just didn't deliver today. It looked like he might have got shafted with strategy. If Lewis hadn't come in for a second pit stop, he would have been even more angry and even more disappointed, I think. But the thing with Valtteri, not just against Lewis, I feel like he's always in a position towards the end of a race when he's getting overtaken that he's on worse tyres. He's got to manage the car. He's not at the highest performance from his car, but he always seems to give up his spot quite easily, I think. I don't think he fights it as much as other people do. He seems like he doesn't quite have that cutting edge to keep people behind. If you look at what Vettel did last week to him, he couldn't get past Vettel last week on fresh rubber. He couldn't keep people behind him. Today, admittedly, it was Lewis Hamilton on fresher tyres.
Much fresher tyres, yeah.
But it just looked too easy, and I honestly think the fight's gone from him already, I think, for this championship. And I do feel for him. I don't know what your take is. I can't help but feel sorry for him, but also...
Yeah, I feel sorry for Valtteri, but, it's tough in these streets. Like, he needs to also realize that the team isn't going to give him the victory. I don't know whether he had the expectation of, he's going to start on pole and then the team is going to give him priority. Like, they're not going to do that. And look, he might feel that he got shafted by strategy, but Hamilton was the one that sort of considered going long. I mean, he was sort of chatting to the pit wall all the time about the possibility of going, for a one stop, and whether it's possible, what the team thinks about the tires. Obviously, he decided to not do it at the end, but I did think that Valtteri pitted too early for his second stop. Because obviously Max was on the mediums, then they put, I think, and I think he ran for about 10 laps. Then Max and Valtteri put it at the same time. And then Lewis basically maintained his pace for another 10 laps after that. So I feel bad for Valtteri, but, this has always been his weakness against Lewis, has been the race management. finding the extra 2 to 3 tenths a lap to make your tires last, and still be in a relatively good place at the end of the race. I think this is, going to be not a nice feeling after having his contract renewed for another year. I think it's, he's third in the championship. Max overtook him now in the Drivers' Championship, which is also, I think, a bit of a knock given how dominant the Mercedes has been in the beginning part of the season. So Valtteri, and what, he's more than 30 points behind now. I think he's 34 points behind or something like that.
Yeah.
Which is already like Lewis can retire and still be ahead in the championship, which isn't a great position to be in for somebody as, consistent as Lewis. So I think if he doesn't pull things back over the next 2 races, he's probably going to be in that support role that he's found himself in the second half of the season over the last couple of years, unfortunately for him. And then he's going to have to try and again next year. There's nothing else to it really. Now, before we move on to probably as per usual, the most controversial team on the grid, there are rumors, or not rumors, but it's, people are sort of expecting a similar race next week in Spain due to the high temperatures. Now, do you think it's only due to the high temperatures that Mercedes is struggling, or is there something else that's happening?
No, I mean, that is the common denominator, and you struggle to see anything that those guys do wrong as an organization. I was chatting to my mate and my partner earlier at the pub and saying nothing ever seems to go wrong for Mercedes, in particular for Lewis Hamilton. Like, they never get into trouble, they never have issues on track, they never get stuck in traffic or come together or all this stuff. It seems like it's just that 1 or 2 things that can make the difference, and I think it's shown that it is the higher temperatures so far. I wouldn't know, to be honest, on how easy it is to engineer out of a car something like that, because we've seen others who do much better in this pace. We've seen people go slower in hotter and colder temperatures, as you expect, sort of naturally on track variations and climate variations. But I'm hoping it will be a challenge for them next week as well, because if it's not, we're just going to get back into that rhythm of them 1-2ing and scoring all the points. So hopefully it is something they can't fix, and hopefully it is very hot, and hopefully we get a softer compound of tyre as the season goes on to give everyone else a chance. I don't like the idea of ballasting or sandbagging them too much, but today's race was much better, and I think everyone enjoys the fact that it was someone else winning a race. So let's hope it is quite similar, and let's hope that it is the temperatures they can't deal with, and let's hope for a scorching 35-degree in Spain.
Yeah, I mean, we can hope, right? But I'm going to be honest. I think this is going to be the outlier. I think Silverstone in the hotter temperatures was sort of a perfect storm for them. I don't think Catalonia is as bad on the tires as what Silverstone is, and it's been such a strong track for Mercedes, that Spanish track. So I'm not going to be too hopeful. I do hope it's going to be closer. I would like to see Max and Alex in the fight with the Mercedes next week, but let's see, and let's move on to our favorite clowns, Ferrari. Now, I guess we can firstly doff our cap to Charles for bringing home another unexpected P4. Like, I thought last week's podium was fortunate in many ways, despite the good job he did. And I was thinking to myself, I think he started P9. I was like, no, there's no way that Charles is gonna. I was like, if Charles gets decent points, he'd have done a very good job. But for some miraculous reason, and I can't seem to figure this out, they kept going on about how poor their time and management is going to be, and how their tires are going to drop off. Charles makes a one-stop work, showing pace, literally lapping as quickly as the Mercedes in the final phase of the race. How did that happen? Like, I can't figure it out. I actually think Ferrari, they also don't know how that happened. But, I mean, Charles is doing a very good job in that Ferrari.
He's doing a great job in the Ferrari, and I think I can't quite tell what's happening. Is Sebastian Vettel doing much worse than what the car can do? Is Charles doing way better than the car can do? Because both can't be true, which I find quite interesting. They're sort of, it seems like between them, they're figuring out where the car should be. And if one of them finishes 12th and one of them finishes 4th, maybe if they both could drive the car, they'd be 7th, 8th, something like that. But the way people talk about it, and when you look at the onboards and the way it's squirming around, and particularly Seb has to wrestle with it, it looks like Charles is outperforming it. And I don't have a clue. You're right. I don't have a clue how he's doing it, because one-stop strategy, which people said was impossible, it looked like maybe Lewis was going to maybe go down that route at one point as well, when it looked like Max was maybe going down that route, and probably would have if he didn't then build up the lead to be able to cover himself for the second. Great performance from him. And his Sundays, other than crashing into his teammate, which is obviously a big no-no, his Sunday performances have been unbelievable. And I think because of the drama that's going on at that place, and like you said, it's a circus, the amount of clowns they've got in that organisation at the moment, he's going under the radar a little bit, and I think he deserves a lot more credit than he's getting. Podiums, 4th place finishes, when his teammate is, spinning around on lap 1 and finishing outside of the points and not getting out of Q2 and Q3 and things like this, Q1, sorry. He's had an amazing season so far, and I think through the adversity of this as well, it's going to make him a better driver once they put something underneath him that is capable of winning races again. I think it's more clear than ever that whatever they were doing last year was, illegal as hell to make that car absolutely rapid and a race-winning car. But yeah, I agree with you. I think he's done an amazing job. I wish I understood even half of what goes on at Ferrari, because I love Sebastian, but people say put respect on his name. He's a 4-time champ, and he is, and he's a great driver, but it's like 2 different cars. It's like you're looking at 2 different teams, 2 different cars, and I don't know what to make of it. I don't know. He said himself, I think he said himself, the quote was, "It doesn't make any sense," and it doesn't. I don't know what he has to do to get a good race weekend, because no one wants to see people struggle like this. We saw it with Alonso when he went to McLaren. You don't want people's careers to tail off like this, driving around for the scrappy points. And the thing that makes it more challenging and puts more pressure on Seb is the fact that Charles is doing the opposite and pushing for podiums and proper scoring points, which they need. So I don't know. What do you make of it? Do you have any answers? I don't know who has the answers.
I don't think anyone has the answers. So firstly, I think, and I find it hilarious how none of the teams, just talking about the tyres specifically, none of the teams knew what was happening and why it was happening. Red Bull, they don't know why they were fast. Mercedes, they don't know why they struggled. Ferrari, biggest surprise to them. Leclerc was like, how is this possible? I'm going so quickly. None of them expected it. And I just find that fascinating, that the teams weren't able to figure out what was happening with the tires, despite having, doing the long runs on Friday when it was also hot temperatures, which is why I was sort of puzzled by Mercedes, because Mercedes was actually, they came out and said, well, it seems like we figured out sort of our pace issues in the hotter temperatures, because look how good our long run pace was on the Friday. And then today came and it was the complete opposite. But specifically with Sebastian, I think, and this is not just my theory, I think it's a bit of a perfect storm for him, because I think the car is a handful, definitely. There's no denying that. I think Charles has the driving style to hustle it. I think he figured out a way with his driving style to get through those fast corners in the middle sector at Silverstone that Vettel just can't. I don't think Vettel has it in him to drive the car in a way that gets him to hustle it around, with the low downforce like Charles is able to. I think he figured something out at Silverstone, because if you go back to Hungary, Vettel was actually the faster driver, which is why I'm not yet ready to say, Charles is just outperforming Vettel, because I don't think it's necessarily the case. I think Silverstone has always been a track that Sebastian doesn't like. Sebastian likes the long, slow corners, the ones where he can really sort of, feed the car in, gently and really get on the throttle early, where I think Leclerc is probably better with the faster stuff. And I think that's where Sebastian maybe isn't as strong. So I think Silverstone, I think, highlighted or, emphasized the differences, firstly, between the two drivers, and secondly, between their driving style and their preferences. So I would be curious to see how they get on in Spain. And I'm trying to think what track will sort of suit Sebastian next? Imola, maybe? Like, I'm not sure. Like I'd be curious to sort of see how they get on with a bit of a different track. But what I found very interesting, is Vettel is done. Like, he's fed up with Ferrari. Like, if you can listen to him on the radio, he just ignored them flat. Like, they spoke to him after the race, didn't say a word. He just ignored them. And afterwards in the press pen, and this I actually found hilarious. I didn't realize this when I was watching. But Ferrari essentially forced him to pit after running for 10 laps on his hard tires because they didn't want him in the way for Leclerc to execute his strategy, and then put him on medium tires to run the last 20 to 25 laps of the race. So they literally didn't care about Sebastian. They were like, whatever, just get out of the way, let Charles do his thing. So that's why he's probably furious with them. And actually, Ollie, do you think he's going to finish the season with Ferrari?
It's a great question because I've seen the rumblings on the social medias, as you think, and you're right. That first message, the one that got played of him basically questioning what they'd done and asking why, and then, like you said, in the press pen afterwards saying, we talked about strategy, don't pit me to then put me in traffic. You've pitted me to put me in traffic. You've pitted me to put me in traffic, so I'm out the way of Charles. It's gone so sour in that organisation, and you're right. I think the way that Seb is handling himself suggests that he's sort of checked out potentially a little bit in terms of the relationship. He's a solid driver and he's a proud driver, and he's going to try and get the best out of the car as and when he can. But I don't know if Ferrari care enough to keep him around. Is he just now, in the way of their golden boy, if you like? And who knows? I mean, we're joking and talking about people coming in. We talked about the super license situation when Racing Point were needing a driver. Could they nab Hulkenberg to just bring him in and throw him in instead? Like, who knows what they could do?
It would be interesting. I think Ferrari would avoid it just because of the optics. I don't think they want that PR mess with the driver leaving them midway through the season. And the thing is also, I think Vettel has been very much protecting Ferrari for a couple of years now. I feel, at least. I think Vettel has really been trying to keep all of the dumb things they've been doing out of the press and out of the public domain. So if they make him angry enough, he might go and spill all sorts of secrets about the team that they wouldn't necessarily want in the open. So, but I mean, a very, very interesting dynamic. Fascinated to see what's going to happen next week in Spain with the two drivers. Okay, so let's maybe talk about our midfield teams, our midfield Class A maybe, and that would be Racing Point, McLaren, and Renault. Now, for Racing Point, again, I keep having slightly higher expectations for them. I wasn't one of the people that thought that Hulkenberg was going to get a podium. I was pretty certain that Max is going to get past him quite quickly and move on ahead. But overall, he was looking quite good, Hulkenberg, in P5. I don't think anyone expected the one-stopper from Leclerc, so they were probably thinking P4, P5 for Hulkenberg and Stroll. Hulkenberg ran into a bit of trouble with his tires and then had to come in for a late pit stop, which relegated him to 7th. Stroll, I mean, he did his job. Didn't really see anything amazing from him, but, didn't make any mistakes. Played it safe. He was outperformed by Nico though this weekend, I think, in the race and in qualifying. So not necessarily such a great thing for his CV. Yeah,
completely agree. And it's an interesting point you raise about where are they performing based on what everyone saw at testing and what everyone saw after the sort of qualifying sessions. Because I agree with you, there's so much hype around them. But to be fair to them, I've made this point a couple of times, I don't think they were giving themselves the hype. There was loads of hype around them and about them in the press that they're quicker than this, they're quicker than that. Can they challenge the Ferraris? They're doing better than they have for a long time, which is great. I agree. Everyone was trying to manifest this Hulk podium.
I mean, they were just meditation candles. The whole Twitter was full of meditation candles with people manifesting.
Yeah,
I'm looking at you, Beth.
Yeah,
Donny.
It's their fault. I said to them earlier, don't you remember what happened last time you tried to manifest something? The boy didn't even get out the garage.
Yeah.
No, I think we all made the point on Twitter that Max is going to get past him quick. Like, it's just, we all knew that. And I think his start was disappointing. Completely agree with you. Nico outperformed Lance all weekend, looked quick, was racing well. We didn't really see them too much on the telly because they were sort of just running their own race. They were, I think Tier A midfield is a great way of putting it. They were clearly quicker than, the Renaults and the McLarens and the Alpha boys. Couldn't keep up with, the front runners. And, I did have my conspiracy theory hat on when I saw Nico coming in, until I saw afterwards he reported vibrations, because it made zero sense, the optic.
Sure.
It looked like Stroll had put a call in and said, this bloody reserve boy is not going to come in and finish ahead of my son. But yeah, he was reporting vibrations, and after last week, makes sense that he would want to come in and get that sorted. And they put on the softs just to maybe give him a chance of, if you can get half a second out of these last, 5-10 laps on these softer tyres, you might have a chance of getting back into it, which he didn't. But great result for them. I mean, good result for them in terms of where they could realistically finish. I think they probably, after the first sort of third of the race, probably thought they would finish ahead of Albon. I thought they were going to, until
Same.
Started.
I thought they were, I think with like 12 laps or 10 laps to go, they were 16 seconds up the road. I remember looking at the gap thinking, like, Albon has done a great job to get through the field, but I think this is where it stops for him. And Albon, I don't know how he did it, but he made up those 16 seconds and passed Stroll. So, yeah, no, I agree with you. I think they might be slightly disappointed that the Red Bull got them in the end, but I think the Red Bull just had amazing pace this weekend for some reason. Yeah.
And that overtake, I tweeted this earlier, I don't understand the TV directors ever. I can see on the screen, the timing screen, is 8 tenths behind him, he's 7 tenths behind him, he's 6 tenths behind him. And I'm like, cut to the overtake, cut to the overtake. And I'm just looking at some guy's mask on the pit wall, pulling up.
And we were getting close-up shots of Hamilton's graining and his blisters. Yeah. I was like, we know Hamilton has tire problems. Like, it's been well publicized. Can we please watch something else? But yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. McLaren had unfortunately for you, McLaren had a bit of a silent race. Like, didn't really see Lando or Carlos that much. Not a surprise for Carlos, of course, but it's surprising that we didn't see Lando on the camera more often. Like, I don't know if you have much to say here, but it seems like they were one of the teams that sort of were unpleasantly surprised by the tire degradation, struggled on tires, didn't really show pace throughout the race. Carlos got scuppered by another pit stop again after doing a relatively good first stint. Basically, the tail of the tape. I don't know if you have anything to add there.
No, I think you've summed that up well. I would say that I think after the first 3 races, they were quite vocal, particularly the drivers, that they think that was the best sort of track and the best car that they could put out for a while in terms of what was coming up. You're right, it's always disappointing because that midfield is so close, and as a fan of that team, you do want to see them doing a little bit more. There was a few bits and pieces of tidy racing, but yeah, they just couldn't quite get the car into the window that it needed to perform today and move up. I think Lando, did he start 9th, finish 9th, or started 10th, finished 9th? So gained +1, a couple of points. He's having a good season. Carlos again unlucky, but I think after last weekend, they knew it was going to be a tricky race for them again this week. And they're going to need to bring, I think, a little bit more to Spain and to the future races, because those other midfield teams are looking like they're quite settled and in a bit more of a steady rhythm. It almost looks like McLaren, I don't want to say they've peaked already this year, but they definitely,
they're stagnant a bit now, where it looks like, and we can talk about Renault now. Renault seems to be slowly but surely, like, they seem to be improving, which is, I think, quite encouraging for them. Just, I know last year they were sort of saying that, they're going to bring this upgrade package and it's going to transform the car into a potential podium contender. And then we know what happened. But this year, like, it seems that every race they're bringing 1 or 2 little bits, trying to make it better, trying to improve. Ricardo had the great qualifying to qualify P5. Ocon had a bit of a struggle with the penalty and everything else that happened. But other than Charles, Ocon was the only one that made a one-stop work, came home in 8th place, scoring a couple of points for the team, which I thought was a very good result. A bit of a under-the-radar performance, but a very decent result for Ocon. He got past both McLarens, got past both AlphaTauris. So, good effort.
100%. And I think back-to-back good results for Renault. I know Danny didn't get into the points today, but he probably would have bar that spin. And I think they had performed really well last weekend. The race result was really good. And you're right, they're on that sort of small incremental gains. And it's good to see because they were, Ferrari have taken the clown badge off them, but they were the clown team for me for a long time, particularly Cyril. Really frustrating guy. And as much as it's, funny and frustrating to watch, you want a competitive grid across the front to bottom of the grid. And Renault definitely moving up there, definitely look like that car is much more planted and they're much more settled. And for Esteban Ocon, like you said, really, really good performance, flew under the radar, but good couple of points, decent result last week, and they look like they're a little bit more settled, a little bit more in a rhythm, and yeah, it was a really good result for them, and they will be frustrated, and I know Danny will be frustrated that he made that error, but even just having one car in the points, I think they deserved more, or they maybe performed better than the points haul will suggest from this weekend, and yeah, third fastest in practice, whatever it was, and yeah, it looks like they're making progress.
No, agree 100%. And I guess let's just quickly touch on our midfield Class B. Now, AlphaTauri to me is sort of on the fence. Sometimes I feel they should be belong in Category A. Sometimes they should belong in Category B. I think today was Category B. Both Gasly and Kvyat struggled. Gasly had a very, very strong qualifying again. He's been qualifying really well over the last couple of races, but didn't really light it up in the race, unfortunately. I think they also struggled with the tyres and everything else going on. Haas, look, I'm speechless by Haas and by Alfa Romeo, to be honest, because they don't interest me at this very second. Like, there's nothing surprising that happens. I think the only surprising thing that Haas has done over the last year was when they left Grosjean out, last week to, pull some questionable defensive moves. Oh, I guess Hungary was also an interesting one with the tires, but I don't know, like, they just sort of seem stuck, Haas. They're not really going anywhere.
Yeah, they seem stuck, and I think you're right, that sort of crop of people you called out there, Haas and Alfa in particular, also look sort of stuck, not very interesting to watch other than when they did that pre-race pit with Grosjean and K-Mag the other week. K-Mag as well being a bit of a tool coming onto the track like an absolute maniac earlier was probably the only thing we saw from them.
But were you surprised, Ollie? I'm not surprised. The thing is, like, Magnus is one of those guys when he does something ratchet, I'm not even surprised. I just go, oh, but it's Magnussen. Similar with Grosjean. Unfortunately, they have two of those drivers in one team. Yeah,
you're right, and I think there'll be changes there next year. Hulk was talking about, he's been talking to some teams. There's not too many seats available, and people will be out of contract there, and they need to change something. They're definitely stuck. Alpha, just so nothing, such a nothing race again. And then AlphaTauri, just to touch on them, I agree. Pierre's doing really well on Saturdays, which I enjoy. He's a good guy. I really like him, and I'm glad he's performing on that day. But again, today in the race, wasn't quite there. So quite a nothing showing from all of them, really.
No, I agree. And then let's maybe go to our bottom feeder of the week, Williams. Now, George Russell, again, qualifying king, making it into Q2, comprehensively outperforming Latifi. I think he's making good account of himself, given the circumstances. On race day, though, it's a bit of a struggle still for Williams. I think they were probably, along with Mercedes and McLaren, the team that struggled the most with tire degradation and tire management, and it just sort of went downhill from there. Not much else to say. They finished in the two lowest positions, so that's pretty much the tail of the tape.
Yeah, nothing to add there. You're right. George is doing a great job on a Saturday, but they've got nothing they can draw out of that car other than, tuning it up for a quick quali lap. We know George is good in the wet. I think their only chance of points is a full wet, 90-minute race in the rain at some point this season. I said it after the Hungarian Grand Prix that people thought they'd made a bit of progress, but to me, they still don't look anywhere near scoring a point unless something crazy happens. But they're making progress. They look a little bit better than last year, but they need something like an all wet weekend to have a chance of doing anything, I think.
Sorry, I just saw that Will from Formula Podcast 1 commented, really happy about Kvyat being able to show his form. What form? Like, he is comprehensively beaten by Gasly. I think he finished ahead of Gasly in the race today, but purely because I think they messed up Gasly's strategy because they pitted him to cover off Albon right at the beginning of the race. I also don't know why AlphaTauri thought they were going to fight Red Bull, Albon in that Red Bull, and trying to keep him behind, trying to protect themselves from the undercut. I'm like, that Red Bull was coming past one way or another at some point. So I think, Will, I don't know if he's being sarcastic or not, but I don't really see the Kvyat form he's talking about.
I wonder if someone has been rating Kvyat a little bit too highly for his liking in your form thing at the end of the race.
in my driver ratings, but Kvyat has literally been the most anonymous driver, and in a grid that contains Carlos Sainz, that's saying something.
They'll pit Pierre next week to cover off Hamilton.
Yeah, good grief! That was a dumb strategy call, actually, and I guess that's a good point. That's a good place to maybe move into our final segment, which is the TF1 Awards. Now, Ollie, I don't know if you've watched the show before, but this is, of course, You know how they say that Formula One is the pinnacle of motorsport? Well, all I'm saying is the TF1 Awards is the pinnacle of motorsport awards. So whoever wins one of these prizes is probably going to smile for the rest of the week. So let's maybe, go into the first award, which is the Pastor Maldonado Award for most dunderheaded deed.
Yeah.
Who do you think?
Yeah, so that one for me, we touched on it a moment ago. There wasn't too many dunderhead deeds going on, but Kevin Magnussen coming back onto the track for me was shocking. I don't know what he was doing. He was trying to bully Latifi by almost murdering him. On the coverage I was watching, it was actually happening in the background of the shot. I can't remember what cars they were tracking at the time. And so it looked weird. He sort of come in, and it was really strange. And you watch the replays, and every time they showed it, it got worse and worse for me. I credit Kevin Magnussen quite often for how much I enjoy his aggressive defense of a position, but for me that was too far, and 5 seconds, very deserved. Could have been harsher, even potentially. And for me, it was unsafe driving from a Haas again at Silverstone, and I think that was the only thing that I felt could have been delivered as well.
I think I'd like to put forward our two spinners of the race. So Vettel for his lap one spin was always a fun one, and Daniel Ricciardo. And characteristically, I think he got frightened by Carlos for some reason, but because Carlos stuck his nose in there, and before you know it, he was pointing in the wrong direction. So, but I think I'm inclined to agree with you there. I think Kevin Magnussen deserves it. He got a penalty and he got an award. So I mean, there's some consolation, right? All right, so the next award is the Lewis Hamilton #Blessed Award for luckiest driver. This one is a bit of a tough one for me. I couldn't really make up my mind. So who do you think?
100%. I've been racking my brain ever since we talked about doing the pod on this one since the race ended, because there's no one I would describe as lucky. And also with the #blessed Lewis Hamilton, I didn't want it to seem like I thought they were too lucky, but I'm going to give it to Verstappen, not because he was lucky in the way that he drove, because he obviously drove the car very well, but as we saw last week with the tyres and moving to a softer compound this week, that one-stop strategy, it's not lucky to execute it, it's brilliant driving and fantastic motor racing to do it, but they could have gone at any moment. It could have dropped off very quickly, it could have hit the cliff very quickly, it could have slowed him down quite quickly, and it didn't. So I'm going to have to give it to him, but purely because I couldn't see too much luck anywhere else.
My nomination is sort of similar to yours. I'm going to give it to Charles, just because, look, he is doing very, very well, but it seems like they don't know why they are doing really, really well, which to me is slightly fortunate, where, like all signs indicated for them to have a bit of difficult race this week. And then here comes Charles in his low downforce Ferrari and makes a one-stop work. And neither him or the team have any idea how they were able to do it. So, I mean, again, not taking anything away from the way he's been driving, because I think he's been driving brilliantly well. But, I think for a lot of the teams that sort of went well with the tires this week, I think there was an element of luck there, because it seemed like none of the teams really were prepared for how things ended up happening.
Yeah, that's fair.
Cool. Then our last award is the Nico Hulkenberg Podium Award. Now, I know some of our friends hope that the name of this award would have to change, but alas, the Nico Hulkenberg Podium Award for unluckiest driver remains for another week. Who do you think was the unluckiest driver today?
Yeah, another kind of tricky one, because I felt there wasn't too much luck floating around for anyone to be unlucky. I'm gonna give it to Carlos, because he's been sort of done dirty by the pit crew again, not for the first time this season. And I think there was, both stops. One was disastrous, the second one was slow as well, even though it wasn't as bad. And I just felt like they also had an issue with Norris as well, actually. So I'm just going to give it to the McLaren garage, actually, I think, for this one, particularly the people responsible for the tyre changes, because we talked about how close that midfield is earlier on in the episode, and we talked about how McLaren were probably having a bit of a nothing performance this week, but those seconds and those tenths add up, and the way they were going, I don't think it probably impacted drastically on the race, but it definitely impeded Carlos's progress and his ability to get that final stint done effectively, and they were just up against it after that. And for me, they just didn't really have, I don't want to say it wasn't unlucky. They did a bad pit stop multiple times. So he was the only one who I think could probably look at this one and say, I've been quite hard done by today, not for anything I've done myself. So for that reason, I'm going to give it to Carlos.
I agree 100%. I think Carlos deserves it. I think it's now the third or fourth consecutive week that he's been in the conversation for unluckiest drivers. So I hope his luck turns, because I think he's been very strong in the races this year, actually. Like, he has put in really good performances. And I think last year, where they came off, for some reason this year, there's always something tripping him up at some point during the race. So yes, Carlos, hopefully this makes you feel better. And I mean, we're going into Spain. We're going into Spain next week, so that's pretty exciting as well. Not traditionally the most exciting venue for a race. I guess maybe with the tires and with the heat, it might make things interesting, but I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. Not too excited to watch it at Spain. However, I am excited for Formula One to be back again for another week. It's going to be really exciting. There, as always, lots of questions that we need to ask ourselves. Is Vettel still going to be a Ferrari driver in 2 weeks' time? Can Renault keep making their incremental gains and maybe slip a car onto the podium? Can Alex Albon finally sort out his qualifying? So lots of things. Yes, holding thumbs and crossing fingers. Lots of things I think we need to wonder about in this coming week. And Ollie, I would just like to thank you so much for, being able to and being willing to join me on the podcast this weekend. It's been an absolute joy having you on. I'll leave your details in the description of this video. So everybody, please go and check out Ollie's channel. It's super, super informative. He's got really, really cool content. I mean, he discusses track evolution, and to me, that tells you everything about the content creator you need to know. So please go and check him out. I think he's also on Twitter. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're TGSF1 on Twitter.
That's the one.
Yeah, so please go and do that. And then I guess for myself, you can follow me on Twitter as well. I'm at TF1Show. I tweet every now and again, mostly nonsense, but every now and again I drop a pearl of wisdom. But yeah, everybody, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back in a week's time with another race. Can't wait to see it. Can't wait to chat to you guys again. Cheers.